Week 1 of November, deuces. Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Hello, it is us as we are each and every week here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. You know how I started each and every week, bullet points, whether we get to all the bullet points I bring up, that's to be determined of whether or not Paul and I want to go there. Bullet point number one, oh my goodness, the SEC is still wide open with a couple of upsets yesterday, and Georgia still not looking convincingly like a dominant team. We'll get to that. Bullet point number two, just about every conference now is wide open, including the Big Ten, who could steal 4 college football playoff bids. Bullet number three, Colorado didn't play yesterday, and they are still in contention for a college football playoff berth. Bullet number 4, Tuesday, the biggest decision America will face in a long time. The college football playoff rankings. What did you think I was talking about? The Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate. Cannot wait to dive into it as we check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate on the Matt Barrie Show. Paul, good morning. How are you? I want to start in the SEC because why not? Vegas warned us. Vegas was right. Texas A&M goes into Columbia and gets upset by the Gamecocks. Not only upset by Beamer and the boys, they got beat down.
People should have been surprised, Matt, because you've lived there. You know how ferocious that stadium can be, especially at night. But that South Carolina team should have beaten LSU and came within a whisker of being Alabama. I mean, they were due, and Shane Beamer has that game in him every year. If he had about 5 or 6 like that, they'd be in the CFP. Uh, but yeah, Texas A&M just felt a little bit thin. I mean, they were getting by on a lot of things. So not a big surprise there. But it was indicative of the league though, and suddenly you're looking around and thinking about games. I was thinking about this earlier, like what are the games that matter the most now? And the fact that the final day of the season we thought it would be Texas at Texas A&M, it still will be important.
Sure.
Tennessee going to Vanderbilt might be a game that determines a college football playoff berth. That's how crazy this situation is right now.
Yeah, and look, Texas A&M still, this is going to sound so stupid and cliche, and I can't believe we're saying it on a YouTube show, but Texas A&M still has everything in front of them.
It does.
But to your point, it was kind of like the Mike Elko story is still great, what he's done in year one based on the expectations when he came there, which were none because of what happened in the prior regime. But the fact that he still has them in position, but you kind of just felt at some point it would fall out a little bit because I'll say this as kindly as I can. They were at the top of the SEC standings. I don't think anyone looked at them and was like, that's the best team in the SEC. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and by the way, I mean I think they're going to exit pretty quickly here because I mean they have a trip. Well, by the way, every time I'm about to say a schedule, I start to laugh. They have a road game at Auburn. Let me cue up the band for the laughter. But it's down to the Texas game. Everyone's going to have these eliminator games, Matt.
Sure.
And to me, that's really what the story is. I mean, we're going to get hung up on Tuesday night with whatever the CFP says, just like up and down the dial, they're going to be pointing at 7 battleground states. I am. It's not like I'm not going to pay attention, but I'm really not going to pay that much attention because these games are going to speak. I mean, next weekend we got 3 SEC teams that are on the brink in 2 showcase games. Ole Miss loses, they're gone. Loser
Yeah.
of Alabama, LSU, they're gone. Now you have Texas A&M on the brink every time it plays. So that's really what is important, not what this committee chairman comes out and talks about, whether Penn State's win over Illinois, Trump's Georgia's win at Texas, and Alabama's win against Georgia. I mean, we'll let them talk, but guys like us are going to tell people what's really happening.
Yeah, Ward Manuel, he's the committee chair. Obviously, the AD at Michigan, which will be interesting because the Michigan Notre Dame history, Notre Dame's going to factor into a lot of this. We'll get to them later.
No
They
conflict for him this year.
at all. Yeah, no, they're 5-4 is Michigan. There will be a new national champion. I want to touch on, we'll touch on the SEC big picture in a moment, but look, I know the Georgia fans get pissy with us because they say all Georgia does is win and you guys bash them, but there's no one that could watch the first half of yesterday's game and Carson Beck and tell me that Georgia team is dangerous. They let a Florida team hang around with a third string quarterback and a 2-star kid that came from the Ivy League that never really played, hang around with him pretty much the entire game until Georgia does what they do and they pulled away late. You can't convince me right now. This could change in 2 weeks, but Paul, that was not good.
No, Tim Tebow told me on Friday Carson Beck's still having a great year, and it's really the fault of his receivers. And I watched that yesterday, and I watched him overthrow a lot of receivers, as you did, Matt. And I mean, Georgia could easily lose Saturday to Ole Miss. Wouldn't he really be considered that shocking? And then can they get it back against Tennessee? I mean, that's just where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of that game yesterday, I mean, Billy Napier just will not go away. Although I think he's close to now going away because the numbers game for him is insurmountable. That was a game he had to win, and obviously he didn't, and he's got to find a win somewhere against either Texas, LSU, or Ole Miss.
I'm going to take that the other way, Paul. I think Billy Napier has done enough to stay. I think Billy Napier should get another year. Here's why. You look at that team yesterday, so many players out, their best players out, and they took Georgia 2020. I believe that was when they scored that touchdown to tie. I believe that it was already in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, no, it was time.
2020. And so here's the argument. And those who watch the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate or anything that we do enough, you know my thoughts on a coaching departure. You would better make sure who you're getting is better, part one. Part two, you would better make sure that the guy that comes in is not going to set the program back before he takes it forward. Will you grant me that Florida's playing hard for Billy Napier? I don't like at this point, who are you going to get? Like, who's coming in?
No, I hear you. And listen, I think it's easier to make a compelling argument for him based on what almost happened this year. But spending the weekend with a lot of Florida fans, I'm just going to give you my impressions from talking to them.
Yeah, yeah.
They're ready to move on, and really the only thing that's keeping them with Billy Napier is Lagway. And now that Lagway is done, probably for the season.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a guarantee that he comes back. And I know that's kind of baked into the cake. But I'm not positive of that. So, I mean, it may be a split decision which favors Billy Napier, because the only way I would agree with you to fire him is if you have somebody that is lock solid, because you can get away with it. I mean, he's done enough this year to show that he's capable. The problem that he ended up with, we all focused on those ending games, the stretch he's in right now.
Sure.
FSU exited out. We didn't factor that Texas A&M early on and Miami were on the same level. So I mean, his schedule has just been. I mean, you put Clemson on with the same schedule, or somebody else, even in the SEC. You put Georgia with the same schedule, and they're going to have problems. It's that challenging right now for him. But it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I'm not advocating that he gets fired. I'm just simply saying, based on what I heard down there, he may be out of time.
Well, look, and now with Lagway, it's like, okay, they'll get someone because it's still got Florida talent. And granted, they're trying to develop it. I think he made some wrong decisions and players who he let leave that were there from the prior regime. I mean, I can name 5 pass rushers in the ACC right now that came from Florida that they probably would have liked to have. But now with the quarterback situation, they're done. And then that's kind of the thing where you're going to look at the end product of the final record. And who's a home, like who would satiate Florida Gators taste? You're telling me it's Lane Kiffin?
Again, I'm giving you this is, by the way, what I'm about to tell you may be as reliable as the presidential polls. I don't know. But I'm talking to people in the parking lot at Everbank Stadium.
Good.
So I'll say that on the front end. They want Lane Kiffin. You can agree or disagree, America, but that's who they are fixated on, and that has not changed in 10 weeks.
So let's say, oh, this is so good. Let's say Lane, because look, segue to Ole Miss. That's how you know Paul and I have done TV together for a decade plus. We know how to segue into a segue. Let's just say, like the Ole Miss we saw yesterday against Arkansas, that's the one we're like, oh, there's Ole Miss. Let's just say, Paul, that hangs around because we know they play good defense. They didn't have everybody in that game. Let's just say that Ole Miss shows up against Georgia in Oxford on Saturday. And then what? If Ole Miss ends up 10-2, they're in.
And by the way, that if that Ole Miss team travels back home, they do win the game against Georgia. And I don't think you can leave if you're in the CFP, unless
There you
Florida,
go.
you know what, we're going to announce after the Florida State game he's leaving, and I mean, by waiting that if they don't have a coach within a week, it's pretty obvious it's somebody in the CFP. I don't think you can pull that off in today's world without just blowing your program up. But there's no way Lane Kiffin is leaving Ole Miss while his team is in the playoffs.
Okay, so I've had this discussion with a couple of ADs. I've had this discussion with the guy that I sit next to on Saturdays in the booth on Thursdays. Look at what college football has done to itself in the good 12-team playoff, more teams in. Penn State losing yesterday doesn't matter because they're in the college football playoff if they go 11-1 based on their schedule. Same with Indiana if they're only lost to Ohio State. Okay, there's the good of it. Here's the bad of it. Programs, ADs, and everyone has now put themselves in a hijack situation where if you want to get rid of your coach in your program like Florida, who we both agree needs to be among the top 10 of the program annually, you're screwed. Because if you want to get someone that you believe can elevate them to the Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer era, you either have to gamble and wait past the recruiting period or get someone that's not in the college football playoff with how good is that going to do you anyway?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you can do is completely lie and keep your coach and then fire him in January. You're still going to pay the same price though. Because whatever you get on signing day, you can lose the next day when you get rid of your coach. So it's a Hobson's choice. I don't know what Florida's going to do because the narrative on Florida is already baked in that they have an interim president who happened to be the president, the full-time president who
Right.
hired all these people. So I don't think that's really fair. It's just really the will of the people, and I don't know, Matt. There's almost the last time I heard from the Florida athletic director was exactly 10 weeks ago when he told me he was all in on Billy Napier. So he hasn't said another word since.
You know what's stunning to me is I don't like if you ask me right now, which you didn't, but I'll say it anyway. If you asked me the program, like a health meter of the state of Florida football programs, obviously Miami. I think Mario Cristobal in Miami are on the doorstep of dominance for the next 5 or 6 years with the way he's
Yeah.
recruited. I get it. Cam Ward's a one and done, but I'm telling you, Cristobal can recruit as good as anybody in the country. We're seeing that. Miami's the healthiest program in the state. Florida, ironically enough, might be too. What's going on in Tallahassee? There's a difference between coming back to the pack after a remarkable undefeated season, but what are they, 1-7, 1-8? I would put UCF
Yeah.
healthier than Florida State. And so the fact that we're focusing all of our attention on Gainesville and Billy Napier and the Seminoles are just sitting here. I mean, it's like bottoms out bad.
Yeah, the only caveat with Florida and keeping Napier is that they have the same schedule next year in reverse. So that means they go to Miami and they go to A&M.
Mm-hmm.
It's still brutal down the stretch. So that part is the same. But Matt, it's one of the hardest choices. Usually these almost impossible choices are obvious. This one's not.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there are probably coaches who are probably even in the SEC who might be more nervous today than Billy Napier, but that's just because he has lived on the hot seat almost since the day he got there.
Yeah. And without the quarterback now, it's going to be nearly impossible. I was having a conversation with someone while I was on the road about coaching and kind of those logical steps, right? Like I believe Urban Meyer is the perfect test case for this in the way that he went Bowling Green, Mac, build the thing up a little bit. Who's this young guy with the cool name? Utah, goes to Utah, Alex Smith, historical run, better than a mid-major. I know the Mountain West at the time, but it was Utah. They had a little bit of a foundation. Then he goes to Florida. Now, the way it started at Florida, watch Swamp Kings. Paul's a star in Swamp Kings. It wasn't exactly the greatest start until you insert Tebow Tim, and now the program's on a trajectory for national championships. I think Billy, who I still believe has a bright future as a coach, he kind of missed that step. Going from Louisiana Sun Belt right to one of the biggest programs in the SEC. And I look at a guy like John Sumrall, who Troy, Tulane now. I think Sumrall is going to be an SEC coach and a damn good one at some point because he's got that next step.
Matt, you dealt with him the other day. I don't know him that well, but I've interviewed him. I've heard Summerall's name privately mentioned for two different SEC jobs who are not open at the moment. That's how hot he is about to become. I'm really glad you brought him up. And, they're literally two schools right now. If they made a change, he would be first on their list. That's how well received and highly respected he is.
Yeah, he and I hung out at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. He was watching some of his players there. He's getting ready to leave Troy to go to Tulane, and then we called the Tulane game on Thursday night. And just in our coaches meetings, I was texting Mullen on the side. I'm like, dude, this guy, I'm glad you're getting a read on him because he's just going to be a damn good coach. But he went to that next step, right? I get it, Tulane American, but that's a program that's had success over the past few years with Willie Fritz, and we didn't plan on spawning off into a coaching conversation, but this is what we do. This is what we do. It's now big picture. Look at the coaches that are succeeding in college football. Look at the hell Sark had to go through to get to the point now where he has Texas where they are. Kirby Smart, outlier, assistant under Nick Saban, goes to a powerhouse program in Georgia because South Carolina was about to hire him, so they got rid of Mark Richt. There are so many stories where you find the guy accidentally, and there aren't many of those out there right now. And so you have to start looking at the Summeralls and some of these younger guys.
No, for those who don't know Summerall's history, he played at Kentucky, if that kind of gives away one of my answers. And he's worked in the state of Alabama, not that far from a school in Lee County, Alabama. So yeah, I mean, we're talking. I'll make it easy for those of you watching from far and away. Kentucky's struggling badly, even though Mark Stoops seemingly is in good shape there, but that could change. And there's connections to people at Auburn like Summerall as well. I mean, they only lost a 6th game of the season yesterday. Is that right? 5 or 6? I've lost track of
Auburn. They are now 3-6 on the year.
Auburn's 3-6. They have remaining games against Monroe, good team, Texas A&M, and at Alabama.
Yeah.
Second year of Hugh Freeze. At this point, 2 years ago, Brian Harsin was fired with a better record than what Hugh Freeze has right now.
You know what? And if you look around the country, USC's 4-5. USC's 4-5. You start looking at these coaches that came in this last big cycle and where they are at their program.
Matt, I know I'm getting off base here. Let me save the people at Southern Cal another year or two of anguish. Have a meeting, come to a conclusion that it was a good run for 1 year, but the last 2 have been a disaster, and give Lincoln Riley his walking papers. There's no reason to think this is going to work, is it?
I mean, year 3, they're 4-5. They lost a Pac-12 game yesterday to Washington, who's in year 1 with Jed Fish, whose entire roster is gone.
No, it's. I mean, I've been hard on Lincoln before the season. He did have that big win over LSU, so everybody came at me and say you're wrong, say you're wrong. It was a good win, and since then, almost nothing else to show for it. Even losing to James Franklin at home. I mean, that's now pretty embarrassing, isn't it?
Yeah, with James Franklin, they go down to Ohio State yesterday, same as it ever was there. But as I said during the bullet points, new era college football playoff. Now we got to start looking around the country because quickly before we go to the Big Ten, SEC right now, Georgia 7-1, 5-1 in league. A&M 7-2, 5-1 in league. Tennessee 7-1, 4-1 in league. Texas 7-1, 4-1 in league. LSU 6-2, the loss to USC. 3-1 in league. The SEC is going to cannibalize itself, and then it's going to be up to the committee to decide how many two-loss teams get in, right or wrong.
Right. And this coming week, I mean, Ole Miss has momentum, but should Ole Miss lose, they're gone.
They're gone.
And I mean, it's not really it's not a revelation. The loser of the Alabama LSU game is done as well. So you could see two major domos leave this week. And this is the most consequential Saturday we've had. But we knew that.
We knew,
a year
yeah,
ago.
we circled the date, and we knew coming in that this was going to be something to watch. I do want to hit on the Big Ten for a minute because, again, Penn State, James Franklin's 1-11 in his time against Ohio State, big game. They turned it. They had the turnover deep in the end zone where they could have gotten the points back, and then that 4-down series to tie the game. And now Ryan, look, say what you want about Ryan Day, he'll drop one, but he'll get one back.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan Day now is going to breathe easily, and as he gets to the playoffs. But I'm just fairly irritated when I hear, and I'm not criticizing the factual comments, but oh, James Franklin, they're still in the playoffs. Why? I mean, what have they done to deserve a playoff bid? I realize we have a 12-team playoff, but I don't know how. If you're a Penn State fan, I don't know how you wrap your arms around having this guy as your head coach. I mean, it doesn't matter what the situation is, Matt. He always makes the wrong call.
Yeah, and Paul, I'm one of those that thinks they beat Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland at 11-1. Well, first of all, they're not going to fall out of the top 10 in the rankings this week. They're just not. So 11-1, because here's the scenario I'd paint for you. Oregon, Ohio State, Big Ten championship. Ohio State gets their revenge. You have two 12-1 teams that have lost to each other. They're in. Indiana has one loss on the season to Ohio State. They're 11-1. They're in. Penn State, one loss on the year to Ohio State. You'd have a hard time keeping them out. Now you could start the argument like a two-loss SEC team or a two-loss Clemson. But I just don't think I don't think you'd keep them
Did
out.
you realize Penn State's overtime victory against Southern Cal is going to get them in the playoffs?
You're saying that's not a good resume builder?
That's how close it was.
I know. But old era 4 team, new era 12 team.
No, I know. But I mean, it wouldn't. I wouldn't lose one. I wouldn't shed one tear if they kept Penn State out. I know they won't, but quite frankly, they don't belong.
And then James Franklin lives to coach another year in Happy Valley. Week 1, you could check the tape. We said the college football playoff was created for teams like Ole Miss and Penn State, and we might have that come to fruition. How shocked are you by Clemson?
I mean, I was because I mean, I sat here a week ago and gave praise to Dabo Swinney, which may have been the worst thing that ever happened to him. I know I'm injecting myself into the narrative here, but Matt, I felt like I was doing the right thing on the Matt Barrie Show,
That's
doing
right.
something I had never done before, and now I have to eat it. I mean, Louisville, you know more about them than I do, but I mean, they've had moments, but that was an amazing night.
Louisville's a 3-loss team that you don't want to mess with, considering their losses are all to a touchdown by Notre Dame, Miami. Jeff Brom has that place in the
Good resume.
situation. Yeah, you don't want to mess with them. We saw it last night. So Clemson, the ACC, touchdown on Sunday, Bloody Sunday. Miami, SMU, they seem to be right there for the teams they're going to meet for the conference championship. It's a great story in and of itself with SMU. But here, last thing I want to get to is the beauty of a bye week. So we know LSU was on a bye. We know Alabama was on a bye. We know that's all setting up for a major weekend. This dawned on us after Iowa State went down to Texas Tech and Kansas State lost to Hugh Fritz in a building Houston team. Sitting down yesterday with his Louis Vuitton luggage watching football. If Deion Sanders and Colorado win out, they are playing for the Big 12 championship, which means they are playing for a spot in the college football playoff.
No, and it was a good day for Colorado. I mean, I had some people say, well, Cam Ward won the Heisman. No, he didn't because Travis Hunter was in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania yesterday campaigning, and he got more out of being on all the morning shows than Cam Ward did beating Duke. So I mean I know my friend Stephen A. Smith continues to let anyone know that that's the biggest story in college football this year. It could be, it's not yet. But the fact that literally on election day, we're talking about Colorado being legitimate, and not just some fake story made on a Hollywood stage set, is pretty remarkable.
Paul, they come out of the bye week. I'm going to give you Colorado's schedule. And we were joking about it last night. I even used you as an example. I said, if this happens, I don't care that Paul Finebaum's on the SEC network. His show is going to have to go to the Big 12 championship because here's what Prime has left at Texas Tech. Texas Tech got the big win against Iowa State yesterday. Lubbock's a tough place to play. 4 p.m. It can get weird over there. Utah, who's having a really bad year, but they're still Utah. At Kansas, who's struggled this year. I believe they've only got 2 wins on the season. They're 2-6. And then Oklahoma State, who just got bludgeoned by Arizona State yesterday. If you wanted a schedule to go into potentially a Big 12 championship game against BYU, Paul, they could literally come out of nowhere and be in the college football playoff, which I don't know what we would do.
Yeah, no, listen, I am, for all the things that have been said, doesn't matter. I mean, I'm pulling for them. I think it's an extraordinary story, and I'll continue to compliment Deion Sanders. He finally got the right. I think once he realized he had a pretty good team and didn't have to sell the team or attack the media, they become a really fun program to watch.
So looking ahead really quick, because next week is a week that we've circled on the calendar because of Alabama at LSU, and then the big one between Ole Miss and Georgia. Let me ask you this. Is there an opportunity for Alabama to get back into it against LSU and Ole Miss to effectively keep Georgia out?
Yeah, I think there is. And the one thing about, to me, the Alabama LSU game is more clear cut. There's no debate afterwards.
Right.
Should Georgia lose in a very close game, and it's possible, of course, they do have a chance to redeem themselves. So they have Tennessee the
Yeah.
next week.
Yeah.
And I think that becomes such a big game, even though it's at home, that Georgia with 2 losses, considering one of those losses was against Alabama. Now, again, you start playing. It would help if Alabama won, but not essential. But I think Georgia would be sitting there in pretty good shape as a 2-loss team.
If Georgia wins, does that put Lane Kiffin's feet one step closer to the swamp?
I believe so, yes. Lane has been off the radar the last few weeks. I'm always a believer in Lane looking around, Matt. I don't care what he says. It's worth remembering that 2 years ago, he essentially accepted the Auburn job for whatever reason. I have no idea. If between Florida and Auburn, he would be so much more in on Florida. I think back to the original conversation we had 15 or 20 minutes ago. If, let's say, Lane loses, which I think is important for Florida fans, should Lane lose, doesn't matter how, and he knows, and they know they have him, then they make a change. That might be the one. Billy Napier has to be pulling hard Saturday for Lane Kiffin to beat Georgia.
You know what I go back to as a comparison? I remember Florida thought they got the guy in Tom Herman, and he showed some signs of life. And out of nowhere, middle of the night, Herman gets fired. Literally less than 24 hours later, Steve Sarkisian was named head coach because they knew the guy they wanted. They zeroed in on him, and they made the change then because they knew they had their guy now. Maybe it's a good comparison.
So, yeah, I think it's that simple, as convoluted as it was for me to lay that out. But Gator fans, and I can't explain. I mean, some of it's the visor, I swear. They see another Spurrier in Lane Kiffin.
I mean, it's not, look, he's got the swagger. He's been prone to mouth off. He's an offensive guy. It's not that far stretch of a comparison.
And it is a fact, told to me directly from Lane Kiffin's mouth. He grew up, his biggest hero in coaching, Steve Spurrier.
Uh-oh, here we go. All right, well, that's where we'll leave you on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. Chew on all that content we just gave you for Week 10 as we embark on Week 11. And this time next week, a lot of stuff should be happening. We'll see you then.